Welcome, and thank you all for being here. I'm Eva Velasquez, President and CEO of the Identity Theft Resource Center, and this is my first Identiverse conference, so I'm just getting my sea legs. And I don't know about you guys, but with travel just more recently opening up, this is also only my second conference and presentation of the year, in person and not virtual, so I'm kind of learning to people again. If you guys could just roll with me and give me some grace if I stumble a little bit here, because again, I'm just getting my sea legs. I'm really glad that you're here to hear this facet of the identity crimes or identity issue. It's often overlooked. And I want to talk about the victim impact, some trends that we're seeing, and we will talk about some of the research that the ITRC does. But first, for those of you who aren't familiar with us, this is our mission statement. I won't read it to you guys. But essentially, we help all stakeholders to minimize risk and mitigate the impact of identity crimes. Now, how do we do that? We provide direct one-on-one services to the public at no cost. We are a 501c3 charity organization, so all of our services are free to the public. And those direct one-on-one services are through a variety of platforms. We have a toll-free hotline, we have live chat on our website, we have social media, we get direct messages through social media, through email. I mean, carrier pigeon, smoke signal, I don't care. Whatever way the individual feels comfortable speaking to us and engaging with us, we want to help them in that manner. We helped about 15,000 individuals through our direct one-on-one hotline and advisor-assisted services, and we are staffed with knowledgeable advisors that work directly with an individual and give them a tailor-made custom plan to their situation. So it's not just identity fraud. That's a lot of what we do. But we deal with a lot of people who are dealing with scams, other types of fraud, the social engineering. Did you guys see the keynote? So much of what she was saying resonated with me. We talk to people who are experiencing these things every single day. And one of the interesting refrains that I heard her say is, well, you might be thinking, who falls for this stuff? You know who falls for this stuff? Every single one of us is vulnerable. Every one of, not just them out there, not just those people, every single one of us. If you catch us at the right moment and the right time with the right issue on the right device and the right platform, we are all vulnerable to it. Now it's true, some of us are more vulnerable than others depending on our exposure to the issue, but I just have to say we're all vulnerable to this, to being victims of this crime, especially with the social engineering. Some of that was so crazy. We also have a web-based help center. We help about 1 million people annually through that web-based. It's on our website. You can search for different issues. We also have a chat bot where people can put in very specific issues and get the information that they need 24/7. If a live advisor isn't available, they can at least get started that way. We conduct research and publish those reports, and I'm going to do a deep dive into some of that research in just a moment. We also do a lot of education, of course, events like this, but also we build curriculum. We're currently building curriculum for law enforcement and first responders to help them identify people who are at risk of secondary victimization. It's really something that a lot of first responders overlook. They take a report for burglary, auto theft, things of that nature, and they don't think to ask, were there documents, were there devices, what was on those devices? And we help them to understand if someone may be at increased risk, and then they send those folks over to us for a risk minimization plan. And then of course there's our advocacy work where we look for solutions that are going to be victim and privacy centric, and we do go advocate those at both the federal and the state level. Yes? We are US based, yes. We do have a sister organization in New Zealand, Australia, and we work with other organizations across the globe, but we focus on United States identity credentials. So we will help folks, especially military stationed abroad, if the fraud occurred or the issue is occurring with a United States issued identity credential or in a United States platform. Now this is where I have to get out my phone because I had to write all these numbers down. I'm sorry I don't have them memorized, but I wanted to give you the most up-to-date statistics. Just a few key trends. Government identity fraud rates, I'm sure everyone in here has been hearing about that for 2 years. They have absolutely skyrocketed. But what I think is really interesting is this increased baseline that we're seeing and that I think is going to be maintained at least for another 3 to 5 years. So to put this in context, I'll use state unemployment identity fraud as the baseline. It's always been around. In 2019, we had a grand total of 19 cases. So we had, 1, 2, 3 a month. People would call, they would have this issue. Their credentials were misused at a state unemployment platform. Someone else was receiving those benefits in their name, and we would help them resolve that. In 2020, we saw a 4,100% increase in those cases. Now, for those of you that think, okay, 2020 was the banner year, no, it actually went up even more in 2021. We saw a 7,600% increase. It has now started leveling off, and we are seeing it dip. We're not seeing those extraordinary numbers that we saw in 2020 and 2021, but as of the first quarter of this year, I don't have Q2 numbers, but as of the first quarter of this year, we're still seeing a 500% increase in state government unemployment identity fraud. That's our new baseline. The thieves have discovered that this is lucrative, and keep in mind, this is after those enhanced benefits were sunset. They're still going after these benefits. They're easy. The credentials are all out there and available, and when they need to refresh that data, it's very simple for them. When they implemented some new processes that required driver's license data for a lot of the states, what did the thieves do? They started hacking into auto insurance carriers to get that data. In fact, when Geico had to give their data breach notice and sent that out to the public, this is the first time I ever saw it, they specifically put in that notice, we believe that this information was compromised so that state unemployment benefits could be applied for in your name. Please take the necessary precautions, because it was all of their driver's license data and information that was compromised. So when they need additional data, they go out and refresh it, and it's relatively easy for them. On that note of data breaches, just want to give you a few other trends. Last year, 2021, we were at an all-time high. We captured 1,862. The ITRC has been capturing publicly reported data breach data since 2005. We issue that report annually, and we do quarterly updates. So we really are looking at the trends, both long-term, mid-term, and short-term. So 2021 was an extraordinary year. We'd never seen that many compromises. And the root causes, first, phishing and business email compromise. It came in number 1, root cause, and ransomware. And we were wondering, we're still kind of wondering if ransomware is going to overtake phishing as the number 1 root cause. It still hasn't yet. For the first quarter of this year, we've had 404 breaches. And traditionally, the first quarter of the year is always the lowest number, and we're not seeing that. We've started off with the highest number of breaches in the first quarter that we've seen in the last 3 years. And phishing is still the number 1 cause, with ransomware being second root cause, number 2 root cause. And it's still possible that it will overtake phishing, and that was our prediction, but it's not looking as strong as it was at the end of last year. Okay, now I'm done with all the numbers and all those stats. I want to talk about some misconceptions, and I touched on this a little bit about everyone being vulnerable, and we're all vulnerable. But I also often hear that victims, really, they're gullible or they're greedy. And I don't believe that for a second. Remember, we talked to 15,000 people last year alone. We talked to these individuals every single day. They're just people. And they didn't understand how a process works. Maybe it was complicated. Maybe it was fear-based, and there was a sense of urgency getting them to respond. They're not all gullible and greedy. They're just people who got caught at the wrong moment with a situation that they didn't have any experience with. I also often hear that resolution it's pretty quick. Come on, we have these processes down. Now, we have uniform processes, particularly for financial identity theft, but I can assure you it's not all quick and easy. And if we make the mistake of thinking that the vast majority of these cases are existing unauthorized purchases on a credit card, which a lot of them are, and that is relatively easy to resolve. An individual calls their bank or their credit card issue, we don't hear from those people. They don't contact us because they were able to resolve it with a single phone call. We talk to the people who've had their information misused in government platforms, who've had it misused in the criminal justice system, where someone is serving a prison sentence in their name, and they're trying to apply for a job, and they can't pass the background check. We talk to people who are getting unable to get their prescriptions because a thief has used their information to get a prescription and there's a contraindication. And so now they can't get those prescription drugs for a legitimate health condition that they have. So it's not fast, it's not easy, and I'm going to dig into some of those stats in our aftermath report in just a second. And I'll just touch on, I know saying you're pro more regulation is a really hot topic, and I'm not saying we need more, but we need better. The status quo in the system that we currently have is really not protecting people, and what we're doing isn't working. If we, even just looking at data breach notifications, just notifying people that their information has been compromised, that status quo does not work. They're meaningless, the letters aren't transparent, and now we're seeing a trend where, because it's not a requirement, a lot of breached entities aren't even doing individual notifications. They might put a notice up on their website, and that would require an individual to actually go and visit the website to see that. We're not actively notifying people that their information has been misused anymore. They don't even know that they may have an increased risk somewhere. So I've touched on this. I kind of alluded to our aftermath report. And this is where we talk to the victims that we helped in the previous year, and we ask them a series of questions about their experience. We go much deeper than how much time did you spend and how much money did you lose. We really ask about the emotional impacts, the behavioral and physical, and we're trying to measure the lost opportunity costs. That's really difficult to quantify, but hopefully this data helps us to frame it so we can see if you are not able to get that job because you can't pass a background check because you're the victim of a crime, when does that opportunity present itself again? Does it ever present itself again? Most employers aren't going to say, oh, I'm really sorry that you're going through that. Let me hold that position open for you. They can't. And I'm not blaming them. They have an organization to run. As the person who runs my organization, I fully understand that. You have to staff those positions, but you still have someone who's been the victim of a crime who can't move forward in their life. And again, how do we measure those lost opportunity costs? And that's just one example. So let's look at some of the key findings. And this is our 2021 report. So we surveyed folks both from 2019 pre-pandemic and 2020. The folks that we helped during the pandemic. 3 out of 10 have been victims before. 3 out of 10. I don't know of any other crime type that has that high of a re-victimization rate, other than domestic violence has a very high re-victimization rate. But these folks are coming back again and again because we have static credentials. They're misused. There's only so much you can do to lock those credentials down and stop them from being misused. And we certainly don't have a lot in the criminal justice space or in the government platform space. We're working on it, though. If you want to hear what we're doing, stop me at the networking event, and we can talk about it. I did say that we go a lot deeper than how much money did you lose and how much time did you spend, but those are important matters. And while Most victims said they lost less than $500. The folks we talked to, some of them lost more than $20,000. In fact, when we talk to a lot of victims, particularly of romance scams, they lose hundreds of thousands of dollars. They're so emotionally tied to the perpetrator that they will give over and over again until they're basically bled dry. So even 20,000 sounds low to me when we're looking at the people that we're talking to, because they're often the most complex cases. But I also don't want to lose sight of that $500. Let's consider that. That's relative. $500 for some people is something that's inconvenient and that stings and I don't like it, but it's not going to have life-altering impacts. It does for some people. It does for a lot of the victims that we talk to. That means they can't make their car payment. Maybe it means they can't make their rent. Now they can't get to their job. It can have a real domino effect, just that $500, a real domino effect on their life. And again, remember, these are crime victims. And you can say maybe they shouldn't have clicked on that link or responded to that scammer. But again, a lot of these folks, they're just going, their data's been compromised by an entity that they trusted to be a good steward of their data. They didn't even make a choice. They weren't actively involved in any of that. So these are crime victims that are dealing with this. And here's the resolution. Only 1% of the folks that we talked to were able to resolve their issue in a single day. And again, this is not necessarily nationally representative. These are the people that we're talking to, and we are dealing, again, with the most complex cases. Even the Federal Trade Commission sends us their most difficult cases. They sent us about 20,000 cases since we developed our collaborative partnership a number of years ago. And the fact that these aren't resolved months and months and months later, I won't read the slide to you, but you can see how long the gap is between when the issue occurred and when we survey them. Ooh, was that mood lighting? Hello. Now I really feel like I'm in the spotlight. You can see how long the gap is. And I just want you to consider that a lot of the folks for this particular survey were contacting us regarding those state unemployment benefits, and they needed those benefits. They needed access to those benefits that were earned, and they couldn't get them because they couldn't get the issue resolved. I'm not going to read all of the data on this slide. I just want to focus on the pre-pandemic number at the very bottom of this slide. This is the first year that that particular issue hit double digits. People contemplated suicide. If there's a single stat from our aftermath reports that will disabuse us of that notion that this is really not a big deal, I think it's that one. But when you look at what people are experiencing and understand that it's going on for months and months at a time, it has this domino effect on them, they feel powerless and helpless, you do start to get an idea of how someone can think that the only way to resolve this issue is by ending their life. And I think that's an absolute tragedy. And the fact that it continues to grow year over year, and I know 10% is a small number, but historically, it's been an even smaller number, 2, 3, 4%. One year it was 6%, and I was shocked, but when I saw 10% for this survey, I just thought we're going in the wrong direction here. Here are some of the additional emotional impacts. You see a theme here. I know angry, lots of people were angry, and that's the highest one. But the theme, this helplessness, feeling vulnerable, unsafe, the shame or embarrassment. Thankfully, that number is getting lower. It's trending down, but that's still more than one quarter of folks felt ashamed or embarrassed that they were the victim of a crime.
Why is it trending down?
I think, well, not to pat myself for the ITRC on the back, I do think we're having a lot more conversations about awareness of the fact that this is a crime and we don't need to be blaming the victims. And I think that's making some inroads. I'm not As I was talking about that, and I can see you guys and I can see into your eyes. I can't read for shit. I need my glasses, but I can see your faces. I didn't see anybody out here disagreeing with me, saying, oh, yeah, they are. They're all gullible and deserve this. I see a lot of empathy in your faces. So I think that people are just starting to realize that it's a terrible thing to have happen to you, but you don't need to be ashamed that you're going through this. And the support from the community and from law enforcement to a degree, I think, is getting better. Now, with the physical impacts, what I want you to consider when you look at these, look at that sleep problems. I mean, how many of us can relate to that? You have a major life event, what's the first thing to go? You don't sleep well. When you look at all of these, think about it. This is an individual that is having these experiences. But when you're not sleeping well, when your stomach hurts, when you have difficulty concentrating and you're fatigued, you're really not the best parent, probably not the best spouse, probably not the best employee. So it's also having an effect on that person's network, in, you know, their coworkers, their family, their wife, their kids, but they're also their community, because other people are going to have to support that and pick up the slack. So this issue, while it affects the individual victim, it also has those downstream effects where it's affecting all of us. And from a financial standpoint, it is affecting all of us. It's affecting every person in this room. Now, I wanted to leave time. I don't know how, oh yeah, I have 4 minutes, you guys. So I did want to leave just a few minutes for questions if anybody has any. Yes, sir.
You have a partner with brands in the private sector, so if, say I have reach and I wanted to offer your services to my customers,
We do. We do. We are primarily funded by the Department of Justice, federal grants from the Office of Victims of Crime, but we also have corporate sponsorships and partners. My board is comprised of corporations that see the importance of helping this issue and helping victims, so yes, we do. I answered all of your questions? Yes. I don't know why it was 100% this year. It's usually very high, but that was odd. I don't know if companies were hiring more debt collectors or selling off more debts. You know, as you know, with statistics, there's always can be these tiny little changes that have a big impact. But the referrals sort of come far and wide. So we are the #1 organic search result if you Google things like free identity theft help. But we also have referral partnerships across the country with law enforcement agencies, first responders, a lot of community organizations, 211s, and the Federal Trade Commission. So people are either directly finding us because they have the issue and they're going on a search, or they're being referred from one of our partners, and we do have a pretty vast partnership network. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
Do you have any hopeful trends that you can report on?
Hopeful trends. Yes, you know what? Yes, I do. I do. I have been, I hate to say how long, I've been in this space for over 30 years, and it has always been an absolute chore for us to connect with lawmakers, decision makers, and law enforcement and get them to understand how devastating economic crimes are, nonviolent crimes. I started my career at the prosecutor's office in San Diego investigating white-collar crime. So I did that for 21 years. And I realized at that time how dismissive we are of victim services. We did a great job finding the bad guy and prosecuting him, but we did not have anything for the victims, and we're back. Is that your way of saying time and get off the stage? But the hopeful trend is that I have seen in the last 18 months more willingness from high-level officials, from the White House and the administration to the states, to Department of Labor, just a real willingness to listen to these issues and finally start considering putting more resources to actually provide meaningful help to the victims. So I'm hopeful there. Okay, there's your happy note. All right, thank you, everybody. I hope to see you at the networking event.